Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 187 of the Dynasty Junkies podcast, a proud member of the Dynasty Addicts Podcast Network, or the DAP Network, if you will. And Scott, we certainly will, won't we?
Boom.
I don't think we're live on Twitter. We'll try to remedy that as we go. But Scott, man, it's great to finally get to talk to you. It's been a while. I've missed having a chance to talk to my favorite portfolio player. And also, we've got football, man. Football is on literally right now as we're talking.
Ready for in-season mode. It's all this work we do, all this prep, all this process over results, and now we get to put it into action and see what happens.
Yeah, and you're more of an in-season guy as well, aren't you? Like I don't mind the non-point scoring season, but I really love it when the points start mattering, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I do enjoy all the things that we do. Just because I can actually have an effect on it, whereas I don't get to play the game. I don't get to throw the ball, or I can't make an impact on that. But the lineups is what gets me. Like,
Yeah.
Today began, hell, 50 lineups a week for the next, 4 months. So it's kind of daunting to think about it like that, but I've got a process. And I actually had been thinking for like the last couple years on how I can get paid to do lineups. And I've really come up with a plan on this. I'm actually going to be donating plasma, okay, on Tuesdays and Fridays, so that I can sit, because you got to sit for like an hour and a half for that process. And yeah, you're not going to make a lot of money, but I'm just thinking, hey, Tuesdays I could do waivers, Fridays I could do lineups. So I'm like, bam, I'm getting paid to do lineups, baby. Let's go.
That is unbelievable. That's the sign of a true junkie right there, when you have so many lineups that you have to figure out a budget so that you can afford to set all these lineups in every league.
Hey, all that entrepreneur mindset, man. Always thinking, how can we monetize this?
Oh, that's so funny. Hey, man, there's football going on. You and we're certainly here. We're present. We're happy to be joining you today. But we're both a little distracted, if we're being entirely honest. I'm sitting in my bedroom. I'm watching the game just like I think everyone else is right now. But we've got some fun stuff to talk about. What I'm going to do is I'm going to skip the news and notes section. And
Yep.
I think we should just get into some of these trades. We've got a Find Me a Trade spectacular today, where we've got a few different leagues. We've also had some action happen in the listener leagues that I kind of want to go over with you, because
Yes.
you and we're co-managing a team, aren't we, Scott? And we haven't really co-managed to the fullest extent, if we're
We're
being
getting there. We're getting there.
So I
Yeah.
think it's a good chance to talk through maybe our team as well, because
Yeah,
I executed a trade, and I think that you and I probably need to develop a little bit of a strategy around this orphan that we adopted.
for sure. I love
Cool.
it.
Awesome. Let's just jump into some of these listener league updates then. Let's start with our trade.
Okay.
You and I gave up Evan Hull and Will Shipley. This was like 2 weeks ago. And we got back Kendry Miller. This was in the height of the Dennis Allen hate parade that was going on with Kendry Miller. This was placement on IR, right around the roster cut down date.
Yes.
And what I did, my thought process, because I was the one that offered this, was let's consolidate into a better draft profile. Evan Hull was a 5th or 6th round draft pick. Will Shipley,
Yep.
a late 4th round draft pick. Kendry Miller was at the top of the 3rd. Yes, he's in the doghouse right now. He seems to be there just because he got hurt and isn't available to toe the rock right now. So, I thought this was a pretty solid trade on our behalf, just increasing our odds by 5 to 10% of any sort of relevancy. But I want to hear your thoughts.
And adding a roster spot, right?
Yep.
So, whether we had to cut down, and so it saved us a cut, or, gaining a roster spot, either way you want to look at it. Yeah, so I mean, I actually really like Will Shipley, but because of that, I have so many shares that this was a great way to diversify without me even having to, because you were able to do it for me. So it works out perfectly. Evan Hall and Will Shipley are two of my most rostered running backs. So getting rid of 2 shares there was really nice. And Kendry is a guy that I actually talked about a couple weeks ago in our running back show, where I said, this guy is so cheap, like people are actually cutting him. So let's go, maybe offer a future fourth, or go pick him up off the wire and just stash him. And at the time didn't know he's going to be on IR, but that's even better. Stash him on your IR. Hopefully somebody's dropping him. Just throw him in there, because purely for the fact of not only his profile, whether you liked him or not, there's literally nothing behind Kamara. I mean, Jamal Williams, he does not fit that new offense that came in. That's more of a Shanahan scheme. It's not at all what they were doing previously. Completely new offense there. So just pick up those guys behind Kamara and see what happens. I mean, let's diversify. Let's increase our odds, and let's gain the roster spot. And at the end of the day, we may end up dropping him 6 weeks from now. But hey, it's sometimes it's those little moves. You never know what it's going to turn into. If we're able to flip him for a third, or upgrade from a third to a second or something, 6-8 weeks from now, massive win. So sometimes it just starts with those small little moves.
Yeah, absolutely. And while I'm pulling up this next trade, why don't you grab our team from the listener league, and then we can start to break that down, because I think that would be interesting to talk through our respective processes on air, because I haven't given this league as much thought as maybe I should have. But we do have another trade, and it's in the same listener league, Dynasty Junkies 3, Trust the Process, and PK Trees made a deal. On one side, we've got a 2025 first round pick. On the other, we've got Terry McLaurin, Hunter Henry, and a third round 25 pick coming back. So is this package enough for you, Scott, to trade a first round pick to get McLaurin, Henry, and a future third?
I'm actually in on both of those guys this season, just because of, kind of they're the main guys in each of their offenses. But at the end of the day, I still want the first, especially in a 14-team league. So I think that's important. I'm still going to take the first here slightly, but I can understand why you target those guys, especially right before the season, because how many other guys can you buy right now that can have an impact, with a first round pick? I tend to like to hang on to mine and wait till in season to see where things go. But at the end of the day, like, I think it's a perfectly fair trade, and I'll take the first, but I understand it.
Yeah, I think the middle outcome on both sides sort of favors the future first round pick. But this deal happened right after Jahan Dotson was traded to the Philadelphia Eagles. And really what we see is a very clear consolidated target share funneling toward Terry McLaurin. And so I like that from a production standpoint. If I were to just forecast this as a late first round pick, and I told you can get 2 or 3 years of top 20 production from a wide receiver, you'd probably take that deal, wouldn't you, Scott? Like, I know I would. That's about the odds that I'm shooting for, and you're just getting them a year early. Now, that said, I agree with you ultimately. On the value side, I kind of want to just keep liquid right now as much as I can, especially if I can avoid spending that at wide receiver. I'd rather spend up and package that first, maybe with one of my wide receivers, and tier up into something that's maybe a little bit more meaningful if I want to address that position.
Yeah, and I think overall as a process, I completely agree. But if we want to add just a little more context and say, like, hey, here's what else I'm working with. I mean, Trust the Process has Dak and Lamar. So locked at 14-team league, that's, smash right there. And then he already has CeeDee Lamb, Stephon Diggs, Amari Cooper. There's a lot of pieces there that now bringing in that other piece of McLaurin. I mean, it's going to put him in a nice position. And, it's the only issue I have with both of those guys is I don't know that there's anything they can do this season where their value goes up. So it's really kind of an all-in move for this season. But, again, I'd prefer to make that trade later in the season. But if McLaurin comes out firing and Henry has a good year, again, 14-team league with that tight end premium, he could be very useful. So, overall, I think I like the trade for both teams.
A little foreshadowing to discussing our team, because I don't think we're in the same place as this contending team. But when you are opening a contending window, how much does liquidity matter versus just knowing that you're going to be rostering a guy for the next 2, maybe 3 years? How much are you just okay with locking in certain positions, certain players on your roster and saying, my goal isn't to play the value game. My goal is to score points and to win games.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, we could talk about all the process and liquidity and all these things, but at the end of the day, we're trying to win a championship. So when we get closer to that goal, I think it does become less important. I think we are willing to take more risk, so to speak, with not having the value or the liquidity. I just made a very similar trade in another league where I traded for, it included like Derrick Henry and Tyreek Hill. And, that's not a trade I normally make, especially right before the season, maybe like week 6. But to your point, I'm less worried about it because I know it's likely to be a late pick. My team is in a very good place. Even losing 1 or 2 or 3 players isn't going to completely crush me. I'm probably still going to be a playoff team. So yeah, it is less important, when we're taking over a team, or rebuilding a team or retooling a team, those things are going to become paramount. But once we get closer to that end goal of completing the championship, it does become less important. So that's a great point.
Not only that, but let's say you had a Dak Prescott and a Lamar Jackson, something where you have 2 top 12-ish quarterbacks. They essentially become illiquid as well during these windows. Even though they have trade value, you don't really want to trade them away anyway. And so
True.
even though like you have the opportunity to trade other assets, it's almost like, what's the point? What does this really matter? Because that's the goal. That's what I'm trying to do, is I'm trying to find a way into those 2 quarterbacks in a 14-team league. And so I think sometimes we look at trade calculators, or we look at the concept of liquidity, and we don't layer in enough context with the teams themselves and what the goals of the managers are. It doesn't have to be all Derrick Henrys or Tyreek Hills. There can be players that have that liquidity that really just doesn't factor at a certain phase.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And I mean, I think we can kind of look at it from the other angle here with our team. And was that the last trade that we had? So yeah, if you want to
Yeah.
jump into kind of our, the way that I approach an orphan generally is just, let's review the league settings and let's figure out where do we want to put our assets into, and then how do we go from there and make the proper moves. And I'm laughing because I'm noticing our quarterbacks, like every single quarterback on our roster has the same bye week. It's all by week 12. And I never noticed that before, but I just think that's really funny. It's all 12 down the line, and then like half of the rest of our team has bye week 12. So congrats to whoever plays us week 12. You can lock in the win now. But yeah, I noticed with this team, and I guess I can go through the roster real quickly so we
Yeah.
can give some context behind it. But it's not it's not a bare cupboard. I mean, there's some pieces here that we can work with. So quarterback Burrow and Cousins, at running back, Najee Harris, I guess, would probably be, and David Montgomery kind of be the main 2 pieces there, and a couple auxiliary pieces, guys that we roster, right? Normally those
Yep.
ugly running backs, we'll take them. Wide receiver, Puka, Deontay Johnson, Christian Kirk, Brandon Cooks. So not great, but not nothing. And then Mark Andrews, my most rostered tight end. So never going to be mad about that. And then a handful of other, pieces, whether they're vets that we might be able to get something for, or, maybe some youth that turns into something. So not totally disgusting, certainly not anywhere near the worst orphans I've taken over. But, not loaded and ready to go either.
Yeah. And I made 2 trades during the non-point scoring season in May. I traded away Gus Edwards. I actually grabbed Evan Hull and Keaton Mitchell. This was really sort of very early in the non-point scoring season. And then, of course, the trade we just discussed, trading away Evan Hull and Will Shipley to get into Kendre Miller. The concept that I was sort of embracing, trading away Gus Edwards, was just, can I extend the longevity of this profile a little bit further? Can I just say, like, the first few weeks, Keaton Mitchell's probably not going to be available to us, but you know what? Like, we don't really have, in my opinion, a contending window opening up this season. So
Right.
can we just push this out a little bit and try to spread out sort of the point scoring potential? Because maybe we get lucky. Maybe we hit
Sure.
aces and like all of a sudden we're a 500 team and three other teams have given up. There's an obvious rebuilder and we're just sort of positioned for a 5 or 6 seed. And so I wanted to keep that optionality open and not just fully liquidate, but
With
to
these
just try to find a
quarterbacks,
similar
you can.
profile.
Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly. Exactly. Yeah, when you start with a couple quarterbacks and a tight end with these settings, I mean, you're able to kind of play the middle until you have to truly make a decision. I mean, we could have come in and just fire saled everything, but I don't think that would have been the best path for this particular team. Just because we probably would have lost some value by doing that, and it might have been a little more fun. Maybe we would have had more picks and stuff like that. But that's certainly a path we could have taken. I just don't think it was the best path for this team. If we can play the middle a little bit, again, 14 teams, there's a couple extra there that we kind of see what happens, right? So, yeah, I mean, I think we're on the same page there.
Yeah, what are you envisioning for this team though? What would you like us to accomplish in the first few weeks and then extending into maybe January, the early point of next non-point scoring season?
Yeah, so I think the goal is going to be again something we can't do in the non-point scoring season, but to try to move some of the vets.
Yep.
Just because if we're saying maybe play the middle, but we know the odds are we're not going to win anything here. So we want to still kind of tiptoe that line a little bit, but at the same time, we have to have an eye towards the future. So anywhere that we can potentially move off, like, can we get something for Brandon Cooks? The first 4 weeks of the season, is he truly the wide receiver 2 in that offense? And he's doing something and somebody will give us a third. Great. We'll take it. Even if that moves us down the ladder a little bit and puts us more towards a retool or a reload. But yeah, I'd be looking to move off of, David Montgomery, Najee Harris. Those guys are never going to be elite. They're not, their value's not increasing, but they could be very useful players for any contending team would plug in a guy like that because
Mhm.
you know what you're getting with those guys. So those guys I would love to move this season. Could consider moving Mark Andrews. I think his value's down a little bit, so I've actually been buying more than selling, but depending on, the right window. A guy like Jonnu Smith on our roster, right? He's in Miami. What's going to happen? There's been some cool comments made about, well, we haven't had a guy like this, right? So maybe we're going to use him differently. Who knows? Whatever people are willing to bite on and whatever we can get, even if it's, future thirds, future fourths, future upgrades. Maybe it's a player and maybe it's Brandon Cooks in a third for a second. Could we do something like that? Even if it's goes from the 303 to the, 211. It's still worth it to try to get some of those pieces and create that, not only the liquidity, but having those variable assets that then we can put into other opportunities, such as if a player we like gets hurt. Maybe now we can move a Monty plus one of those picks or a couple of those picks and pick up a more valuable asset or a younger asset that isn't going to score points for us, but is going to give us maybe future value, right? So we just want to be able to position ourselves to take advantage of those kind of opportunities.
Here's what I'm hesitant to do is to grab a whole bunch of draft capital. I would be more inclined, Scott, to maybe try to be the injury store almost, where
Okay.
when a player gets injured, we offer the veteran replacement for
Yes.
that manager. And we
Yes.
say we'll take on really with a very minimal tax. We'll be very like amenable trade partners. I'm thinking like Kirk Cousins is a perfect example. We've got him on our roster. I
Yes.
wouldn't mind moving him to a 20, 28, 29, 30-year-old quarterback in a similar tier and saying like, please enjoy your points. Just give us an extra
Yes.
whatever, Josh Downs, and then we can
Totally.
start to flesh out this roster because we do have to start 3 wide receivers in this league. And I think that bears mentioning. We
True.
can't completely ignore the position like I may be inclined to in other leagues. But where do you want to push if we could sort of in a vacuum say we want to push our value to one or two positions, for me, the tight end feels very fruitful in this format, this 1.75 premium. I would like to get more robust at tight end with this team. Do you agree?
I've had a ton of success with that over the last couple of years. I had half of a league quit because I absolutely trashed them, starting like 5 tight ends last season and just
Yeah.
annihilated, just smashed the whole season. I don't know if I lost a game, and it was just like frustrating for everyone else because they had elite players, but my tight ends just steamrolled. And it
Yeah.
was, coincidence, but it was nice. It feels good. And so like I love I think one of the ways to put it is, if your tight ends are scoring equivalent to like a QB2 or a wide receiver 2, like what's going to be the cheaper asset to get? You can get a George Kittle much cheaper than, name a wide receiver 2 or a QB2, right? So why not go after, maybe this roster, we're not going after Kittle, but we're looking at those type of assets in the tight end position. We can get them a little bit cheaper than wide receivers are always going to be expensive. Everybody wants receivers, especially starting 3. Like you said, everybody's going to want to build around those guys. So maybe we're going to have to find a different way to fill those positions, and that's fine. If we can build through the tight end and still fill our points that way, I think that's a great path to go. I'm always down for that route. And then, finding the almost like, what Scott Connor calls it, like the QB2 by committee
Hmm.
type of scenario. We have Burrow. Burrow to me he's a stud. He's in the top, category, maybe not tier 1, but he's right up there. So assuming he stays healthy and everything, he's got the weapons, he's got the offense, everything is there for him to succeed. We don't necessarily need an elite QB2. We could, if the opportunity presents itself, maybe there's an injury, something like that. But if we put our assets into tight end, maybe find a couple younger running backs we like, start throwing some darts at wide receiver, we can do that QB2 by committee type of thing with, some of the high end backups. A lot of them you can find on waivers throughout the season. Guys need roster spots, they drop a backup quarterback. So those are approaches you can take that you can actually do something about during the season. You can actually go get a backup quarterback. You can go find those players that, how many times can you just go buy a Garrett Wilson in season? I mean, you really can't. Like, who's going to sell him? So it's hard to do that while you're trying to actually be actionable and make a difference.
So, quick question regarding the tight end position. Would your preferred approach be maybe chasing some of the veteran guys that might be almost like post-hype sleepers? I suppose you could tag them. I'm thinking like Dallas Goedert, maybe Pat Fryermuth, the guys who are 26 to 29 years old, who I'm encouraged by, who were once valued fairly highly within the position. And maybe we can get at a discount now, or would you prefer to wait for an injury to one of the elite 6 or 8 guys and really chase that cast?
I would honestly say both. Because if we can get a fair value on, the Fryermuths, the Goddards, guys like that, great. And if we can still get a discount on like an injured elite player, I would do that too. I mean, I would be open to starting, 3 or even 4 of those guys with a premium like this. Again, in a 14-team league, those guys are going to score just like your QB2s, your wide receiver 2s, like your plug-in running backs. I mean, they're going to score that every week. So there's no reason you can't build through that position.
Yeah. If I were to build a roadmap here, an action plan for this team, it would be to somehow get Cousins off of our team at a decent value, something in the market rate,
Yep.
to consolidate our wide receivers and probably to buy one, not an elite guy, but a pretty good wide receiver who's injured out for the year, so that we can say, hey, we've got 3 or 4 wide receivers we feel pretty good about going into 2025. And to bolster the tight end position. Those would be my goals over the next, I don't know, 18-ish weeks. My thought process is let's draft the next wave of running backs. Let's let them sort
Yep.
of create that momentum for our team, anchored around Joe Burrow, Puka Nakua, Mark Andrews, hopefully one or two other tight ends, and then we'll just throw a lot of running backs at the problem. And over time, we can churn, we can make the sacrifices in season to continue to pick up injured wide receivers. And that can be our path forward to building this thing back into a contender instead of dumping all the resources into wide receiver like I see so frequently.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think it may not be an easier path, but it's a very doable path. Like there would be nothing preventing us from doing that. There would
Hmm.
be no roadblocks because we can go a couple different routes. We can be patient. We can look for our opportunities. And I mean, volume at the running back game is always the way to go. And we can use these guys as currency. So if we're trying to maneuver a position or move a Cousins, and they want us to throw in a Jordan Mason or something, great, go ahead, take it. We'll add those guys in as we need to, and then we'll just refill it with the next guy.
Yep.
So yeah, I think that's a really solid approach. It's not too different than what I generally do with a lot of my teams when we have settings like this. Again, 14 teams, strong tight end premium. It gives you a lot of roster build options. So there's a variety of ways to go around it. And I mean, I think it should be something we could do, pretty quickly. I think we could be a playoff team next season if things fall the right way.
I think so. I hope so. And one thing where we may come into contention, we'll have discussions about probably off air. I really like chasing depressed quarterback profiles that were once elite and probably should still be considered elite. Kyler Murray last year was one of them.
Yeah, great
Um,
example.
Joe Burrow at times over the last 24 months. Justin Herbert right now at QB 17
Oh
or
yeah.
something ridiculous. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I don't want to chase rookie quarterbacks if we can avoid it, even if we have a high pick. I would prefer to grab whoever the next quarterback 15 is, who probably doesn't belong in that tier.
That makes sense. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I'd be down for that. And I mean, especially then that would give us flexibility with having a high pick too, right? Because then we can turn that, split an asset, right? Like we can turn
Yep.
that into multiple pieces. Yeah, I like that a lot.
Now, this is probably going to end up with a shorter contending window than you or I would like. Moving into next season, I'm imagining probably a 2-year window. We'll have some assets that are aging out. Deontay Johnson, Mark Andrews, Joe Burrow. He's not going to be aging out, but we're going to be in phases where like we need to be really serious about contending. And so I don't want to go halfway next year. I really want to start going for it next year and try to be a 2, 3, 4 seed.
That makes sense. That
Cool.
makes sense. And there are the pieces here to do it. And again, there's always some luck along the way. Do we find the right piece? Do we, pick somebody up or buy the injured guy that comes back strong, or get the career year out of whoever, right? And so that all goes with it. But process over results, have a plan, stick to it, go through with it, and then be willing to adjust if it's not going how we foresaw it, or if we see another opportunity. But process over results, have a plan, roll with it, see where it takes us.
Yeah, and we've got a plan for a few of the listeners. We've got 3 Find Me a Trades today.
Oh,
And I don't want to bury the lead. There's some really good ideas in here from yourself, Scott, and also from our co-hosts. And I've got a few trades myself. Why don't we get into these different Find Me a Trade options, though? Starting with our first team, which was submitted by Jeff Jacobs at Alpha Male JMJ. Excuse me, Jeffrey. He's in the Superflex League. His team, J Hogan 12, L'American Gangster, is in a 10-team Superflex League with 1 PPR. It's a start 12, 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers, a tight end, 2 flexes, a Superflex, and yes, kicker and defense as well. We got this this team submitted to us all the way back in July. And here's the manager's comments. So he picked up this orphan during the non-point scoring season with 2 good friends in the league who got him into it. The team overall isn't bad in this manager's opinion. He's made a few minor moves, still trying to get better, but was thinking about moving some of the wide receivers into running backs or quarterbacks. he feels like his second quarterback spot could really use improvement in this non-tight end premium league. Do you have this team pulled up?
I
Cool. Why
do.
don't you read the relevant pieces for us?
Yep. Okay. So quarterback room, pretty solid. Lamar Jackson. And then, some pieces. So Russell Wilson, Bo Nix, Michael Penix, Sam Darnold, Justin Fields. So you've got some starters, you got some youth, you got some high-end backups. Running back, Vidal, Tracy, James Conner, Jonathan Taylor, Gibson, Javonte Williams, Tyjae Spears. Wide receiver, Rashee Rice, DJ Moore, Cortland Sutton, AJ Brown, Deontay Johnson, Brandon Ayuk. Mooney and Dobbs, pretty strong there. And then tight end is very nice. Sam Laporta, Brock Powers, David Njoku, Michael Mayer. Really strong tight end room there.
Yeah, absolutely. What are your thoughts on this type of team, this type of construction?
So as much as I love the tight end room, I don't think we have a tight end premium here. So it's the strength of the team, which is great, but let's there's probably a reason for that, right? Like he probably had Njoku, and why does he have Mayer, and why does he have Laporta, and why does he have Bowers? Because he probably got him late into his rookie draft because they aren't as valued without the premium, right? Also a 10-team league. So we're talking 10 teams, 10 starters. That's 100 players. So a top 100, that's pretty, it's thin, right? It means a lot of luck. So I want to pretty much go elite or bust. I really want to go for those elite guys. So finding a Laporta, smash. That's awesome. But now let's trade from strength, basically. And then that's generally going to be my philosophy is let's look at how many teams and how many starters, and then let's take a look at where that gets us, and that will kind of determine my strategy. But again, without the premium at tight end, I want to move off of that whole room that he has there virtually. I mean, Laporta you could hang on to if you really want to and move the other guys, but I'll throw out my trade now. So basically I'm looking at, let's go after the elite players. He has plenty to fill his starting lineup and more. So I'm going to offer DJ Moore. Let's go to that tight end room, take Brock Bowers, and then your 25 first, and trade it to, looks like JM Murray for Amon-Ra St. Brown. Let's go. So DJ Moore, Brock Bowers, 25 first for Amon-Ra. Might not be enough, but I think it's at least a starting point. It might not be an instant reject. Maybe you get a counter from that. We're going to just consolidate. Going from DJ Moore to Amon-Ra is a big difference for your lineup. It's going to put points in your lineup, and you're not losing anything. I mean, you're probably never going to play Bowers, to be honest with you. And then your 25 first. I mean, if you're upgrading to this with the rest of your roster, you should be, that should be a late pick. And I value picks slightly less in a 10-team league, just, because again, like a second is really, a 202 is, pick 12 instead of 14, right? So you're just a little bit increase there with that. So it's not quite as important to me to have that first.
Here's where this trade makes sense. Is the manager who would be acquiring Brock Bowers currently only has Jatavian Sanders, Dawson Knox, and Cole Kmet. There's a clear need. There's a clear
Upgrade
fit
for him.
here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this helps them, and they're a contending team. I recognize that trading away Amon-Ra St. Brown on a contending team, that can be really, really difficult to do. But I think having one of those elite tight ends opens the door to the conversation. Trying to say, hey, DJ Moore, how much of a tear down is this compared to what you're improving at tight end? I think that's fairly compelling. And then you add in a 25 first. On a trade calculator, I imagine you probably lose this deal. But in actuality, in a 10-team league, I really love this. It's probably what in your lineup, a 3 to 5 points per game improvement. That really matters. When you have 10 teams, every single team looks good on their starting lineups. You really need to differentiate yourself, like you said. And I think you've accomplished that with this deal. Will it get done? I think it's probably pretty likely.
Yeah, and use those sexy names too. So more points this season, but I don't want to give up Laporta, and Njoku doesn't have near the value. But you talk about a guy like Bowers, and especially on Vegas, it makes me a little nervous. So maybe you want to trade him before we see what actually happens there. And you know what? If he's a stud, he's a stud. Like, who cares? You have Laporta, and you've already upgraded your lineup.
Yeah.
And if you don't want both Lions, like, okay, but I don't know, man. If I'm gonna have two elite players on the same team, I definitely don't mind those two.
Yeah. Well, let's go to Andrew Hall's trade because he's actually acquiring another Lion. He's sending away Bo Nix and Michael Penix, and he's grabbing Jared Goff, which if you're going
Stacking.
to go all Lions, let's go all Lions, right, Scott?
Double stack. That's awesome. I love it. Yeah, I mean, hey, you could pull off all these trades and you'll just be, you'll just be the Lions fantasy team. Like it might not be the worst thing over the next couple of years, like remember like the Peyton Manning Colts, yeah, or Peyton Manning Broncos, like, man, I'd take any of those.
How do you feel about stacking on your teams, by the way? Like if you've got an elite pass catcher like Amon-Ra St. Brown, are you actively seeking Jared Goff or are you just letting this sort of unfold throughout your portfolio as it will?
So the weird thing is I never used to care about it. And then for some reason, I mean, I'm guessing it was an experience that I had of just like I remember having Drew Brees and Jimmy Graham and just like absolutely annihilating. And they both obviously crushed. It was a great season. And I had a good team regardless, but that like put me on it like so hard, probably too hard. And then I did try to do it a little more consciously, but essentially I just would do it as like a tiebreaker. I
Yeah.
have two players in the same tier. Which one would I prefer? How about the stack? I don't actually think it's that important. I don't know that it changes, when we're talking best ball. Yes, absolutely. It does change the math. We do want the stack. But in your typical lineup leagues, I don't think it's that important. A lot of times the stacks will come to you naturally, like when you have DJ Moore and then all of a sudden the Bears trade for Keenan Allen, and then you have the 101s, you get Caleb Williams, and then J Mike's on the clock and he knows you're not taking another quarterback because you already have 7 starters. So he offers you a trade up one spot for like the 412. And so then you take Rome Odunze, and the next thing you know, you have the Bears offense. And then you're sitting here going, I'm an idiot because this is never going to work. But sometimes you just fall into it like that. Right. So I don't tend to put an emphasis on it these days, but I will use it as maybe a tiebreaker.
Mm-hmm. I don't really stack very frequently, and it's not because I'm anti-stacking. It's because I have so much Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen and Justin Herbert. Like I try to go for the elite quarterbacks, and their pass catchers kind of suck. The tight ends are good, but like
True.
I don't target Lad McConkey, and I may regret that. That may be a problem for me. I don't target Khalil Shakir, and you know what? That could be a cheap access to really meaningful stackable points. But
Interesting.
I don't want to do that. I don't want to chase year over year and have to churn and have to
Right.
work my way into these stacks. And so if they happen naturally, I think that's
Great.
awesome.
Yeah,
I would love to have Tyreek Hill and Patrick Mahomes when they were Chiefs. That makes a lot of sense to me. But
sure.
I'm not going to stress just because Tyreek got traded to the Dolphins. He's still Tyreek Hill.
Exactly. Yeah, actually, now that you mention it, I think I have probably more quarterback tight end stacks than I do quarterback receiver stacks.
Yeah.
Kyler and McBride, I have a bunch of that. Goff and Laporta, Lamar and Andrews, Mahomes and Kelsey. Yeah, so I mean, it's probably more tight end stacks than anything. I mean, I have every share of Minshew that's ever been put out there on any platform. So I have the Minshew Mayer, the Minshew Bowers, the Minshew Jacoby Myers, the Minshew Amir Abdullah. I mean, I've got all the Minshew stacks too. So just for the record, I've got them all.
Yeah, we'll see where that leads us.
Yeah,
Who am
no,
I co-managing with again?
no, we're good.
All right, I've got one last trade for this one, and then we'll move on. I found an obvious rebuilder, and that's Skull BJT. I think it is.
Yes.
Um, And there's one player on Skull's team that sticks out like a sore thumb to me, and that's Dak Prescott, because everyone else on Skull's team is a first or second year player.
Yep.
And that tells me like they're willing to deal. They're willing to age down. And so I threw kind of a lowball trade offer out here because I think there's some flexibility to add pieces. And I just wanted to talk it through with you. This manager doesn't have a tight end, and they could use a little lengthening of the quarterback room. And so my offer was just Brock Bowers and Michael Penix for Dak Prescott.
Yep. I had identified that team as well, and I thought, oh, I think there's probably something there, but I wanted to stick with just trying to find those elite players, so I obviously went a different direction. But yeah, I completely agree with you that just reviewing the rosters, that makes perfect sense. Going after anytime you can get a top quarterback and really not give one up. I mean, I think everybody's in consensus. Like Penix seems to be in a good spot, probably in a good offense. Like, I don't know that you can really argue that, but when it could be like 3 years, right? Because this be like Jordan Love, and I mean, I think Penix is already like 35 too, by the way, because he played at Indiana for I think 6 years and then Washington as well. So he's old. He's an older rookie. So yeah, I think I like that. I mean, I know I like it. I think it would probably at least start a conversation. I don't know if, maybe you could, if that manager Skull is intent on having points, because he does have Richardson and Daniel Jones, and those two guys, while they are starters, have not had the greatest track record with injuries. So maybe that's where you could throw in like a Russell Wilson or a Sam Darnold, somebody who's technically a starter, but you're not really losing anything getting rid of those guys.
Yeah, no problem with that. Or even adding like a Tajay Spears, I thought was a pretty
Sure.
natural fit as well.
Sure.
Another young player, because they've got a type, and let's feed into that,
Good point.
All right. Yeah. Do you want to read off our next team? Do you have the show sheet up?
I do. So, yes. Okay. This team is submitted by Christian Iandono at CIandono91 on X. League is ND Dynasty, maybe North Dakota. Let's go. Team Lisan Al Caleb. All right. Yes. Let's hope. 12 team Superflex PPR with a half point premium for tight end. It is a start 11 and pretty standard, 1 quarterback, 2 running back, 3 receiver, 1 tight end, 3 flex, and of course the super flex. Managers comments. So 12 team with the half tight end premium came in 7th last year. Super strong finish with receivers turning on at the end. Looks like a playoff worthy starting lineup with enough youth to not worry for a few years, but also know first the next 2 years. Running back and tight end are a weakness, quarterback thin. Should I trade away some of these strengths at receiver or keep it strong, given it could be, 6 out of the 11 starting spots?
All right, let's dig into their team as well, because they've got a really interesting set of assets that I want to talk through with you. A couple bridge guys at quarterback, Jacoby Brissett and Sam Darnold. Young guys, Bryce Young, Caleb Williams, and then some backups like Clayton Tune and Spencer Rattler. At running back, Jalen Warren, Tajay Spears, Travis Etienne, Khalil Herbert, Kamani Vidal, and then some backup guys. Some really enticing backup guys too. It's obvious this manager sort of churns the waiver wire. At wide receiver, Zay Flowers, Malik Neighbors, Deontay Johnson, Puka Nacua, Garrett Wilson, Jamar Chase, the list goes on and on. And then at tight end, not a whole lot aside from Dalton Kincaid. A few Chiggy Okonkwo types, Luke Schoonmaker, Kylan Granson, Jelani Woods. No first round pick in 2025. A little concerning there, but we've still got a second and 2/3.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Do you want to start with your trade?
Yeah, I'm pulling it up. Sorry. Yeah. So here's what I see. I see a middle tier team, a team that doesn't necessarily have a direction or maybe an overriding strategy. It feels like a lot of maybe trade calculator moves have been made, a lot of conservative moves, which is good. It's not a bad thing. but I think this team is probably begging for some type of direction, some type of overarching strategy. And so what I would really want to do is just talk with this manager for 15 minutes and say like, hey, what were your goals? What are your goals? How can we make this happen? Sort of like what you and I did, for 10 or 15 minutes,
Sure.
Scott, where we picked a direction. We built priorities and then an action list around those priorities. And it helps us differentiate ourselves from our league mates. So until you pick a lane, I actually put a few trades out there. I'm going to read off, I think I'll read off them one by one and we can sort of rate
Yeah.
them in terms of whether or not you like them and whether or not it fits this team. So first, Jacoby Brissett, Kamani Vidal for Jalen Wright. What do you think of that deal?
Okay. Okay. Yeah, no, I like that. I mean, Brissett's obviously not a long-term starter, so if we can, get the value out of him now, I like that. Vidal has kind of always been, he's one he's one of those guys I would have fell for in the past, but I didn't so much this year. I know it's an ambiguous backfield, but he comes from just not a Power 5 school. I mean, I don't know. I don't know about him. So getting that profile in Jalen Wright, I much prefer that. It gives you a piece that could, kind of skyrocket in the next 12 months. So create a roster spot and pick up the upside. I'll take it.
Yeah, this to me it's a marriage of potential value gains and higher hit rates based on draft capital. That's all it was using sort of the fundamentals of what we try to do by getting a slightly better profile. Second trade, Bryce Young and Dalton Kincaid for Kyler Murray, moving way up the quarterback ranks. What do you think of this deal?
Yes, I absolutely love this. I mean, Kincaid is certainly somebody I'm on the bandwagon with, but it's quite a bandwagon right now. So maybe we take advantage of that. Bryce Young, I know people are gonna maybe give him the mulligan year. We'll see what happens there. It's not too often that a guy is, that bad and then comes back to be that great. Hopefully circumstantial issues were more of the problem there, but I love going to get the elite player always, especially with two guys that like they have upside, but even so, Kyler's already the better player. He already has the better floor and he has the better ceiling. So all around, I'll do that trade any day.
Yeah, what it is it's selling high draft capital and
Yeah,
optimism. There are
yeah,
optimists with both of those players and profiles. Kyler, there is a lot more smoke now in his trade value, but I think we can buy on the way up with this and do pretty well. I don't think anybody would regret getting Kyler for these two 6 months down the line. Maybe I sound like an idiot and I end up on fantasy receipts, but that to me is the type of deal I want to do when I have a quarterback who face plants in his rookie year. Wait for the value to rebound and then find your way into a better profile.
definitely. Yes, 100% agree.
All right. Third trade, Jalen Warren and Zay Flowers for Jonathan Brooks. This is kind of going in a different direction, saying, hey, I'm going to wait this year. This might not be my year. I'm going to let this thing play out for a few weeks, pull Jonathan Brooks off the IR, because I was looking at expert consensus rankings. Jonathan Brooks is the RB7 overall right now, and it sure
What?
doesn't feel like that. I know. That
Oh,
is
wow.
insane to me. And what I want to do is I want to capitalize in 4 weeks when he puts on pads, and everyone who apparently believes in him to this degree is frothing at the mouth. I think that you're probably going to get more for Jonathan Brooks in 4 to 5 weeks than you will for Jalen Warren and Zay Flowers.
Yeah. Yeah, that's yeah, I mean I like both of those guys and Zay could be a good player for a while, but if Brooks turns into that RB7 at any point, if he finishes the season strong, you can probably flip him to an elite player. And Zay is certainly not elite, even though, I do like him, but I don't know if he'll ever be elite in that offense.
Yep. Last trade for this manager, from me at least, Garrett Wilson for Trevor Lawrence. Looked at ADP. They're actually pretty close. This would essentially be saying I'm taking a strategy stance. I'm moving into quarterback. Quarterback matters to me. I believe that the flukiness of Trevor Lawrence's career thus far has been mostly circumstantial, partially his fault, but that he will elevate once more into being a top 6 to 12 quarterback. And I'm going to move off of wide receiver to make that happen.
Yeah, love Garrett Wilson. Think he's in for a big season, but what happens if Rodgers doesn't come all the way back? What happens if he ages out? What happens if he falls off the cliff? What happens when he just retires in a year or two? The Jets have not shown a penchant to bring in quarterbacks. So yeah, you can go to a Trevor Lawrence who at this point I don't think anybody's ever going to say he's going to be elite. I think we kind of know what he is, but he's still actually really young. And I think maybe maybe doesn't have the upside of elite, but I'm always going to go take the preference of the quarterback position over the others.
Of these four trades, acquiring either Jalen Wright, Kyler Murray, Jonathan Brooks, or Trevor Lawrence, do you have a preference of any of these four deals?
I would do Kyler. I would
Yep.
do Kyler just because I think it gives you the most flexibility beyond that. I think with the other ones, with the exception of Tila, you need things out of your control to happen for them to get the ceiling outcome. And so there's nothing wrong with that. You should make trades like that because you want to find those penny stocks, so to say. But when I can go get the guy who's the guy right now, I want to do that because then I can go any direction from there.
Yeah, let's give Christian another perspective. Andrew had a trade here as well, sending Bryce Young and Puka Nakua and acquiring Kirk Cousins, Michael Penix, and Jonathan Taylor. Do you have any thoughts around this deal?
Yeah, that's yeah, I actually I don't mind capitalizing on Puka. I mean, I'm not sure I'm convinced that he just is what he was last year. I mean, I don't think he's obviously very good, and I think it's just that offense seems like it's going to change a lot over the next couple of years. Is Cooper Kupp healthy? Is he not? He's already older. Stafford's aging, so I kind of like selling Puka at the high point, even though we generally don't do that with receivers. And then obviously moving on from Bryce Young, we talked about that already. So yeah, I know you're getting Cousins, but you're getting the Cousins Penix, right? So you get the now and the future there, and then getting JT. I just think JT is kind of what Puka is right now, like good player, going to get you a lot of points. Value probably not going higher either way. So, positionally, yeah, I'd probably have the receiver, but at the same time, JT is probably going to score you the same points and you can then flip him regardless.
Yeah, I think on a calculator, this probably checks out. Puka
Yeah,
Nakua is going at the end of the second round in startups right now, which is incredibly valuable. The question I would have is this the best way to use a Puka Nakua type? I
right.
think there are probably other pursuits that I would have in mind if I were going to include Puka. We talked a little bit about Justin Herbert. Is there a way that I can get into Justin Herbert, get into a quarterback that maybe I feel a little bit better about, where I don't have to waste two roster spots for the same confidence level? I kind of like stacking if I'm going to have a Kirk Cousins, getting into Michael Penix as well. And Jonathan Taylor, I think, is a fantastic player. So I don't think it's a bad deal. It's just not the type of deal that I would maybe think of at first glance.
Yeah. No,
Um,
that makes perfect sense to me too. I mean, I'd prefer not a running back either, but yeah, I get it.
let's go to your trade though. What do you got?
Yeah, so I just think like he said, his strength is wide receivers. He has a lot of good wide receivers. And so that's fine to build around that. I
Mhm.
don't have any issue with you don't always have to trade from strength. Sometimes that can just be your strength and then you can fill in around it. However, I will say that if that's going to be the case, those are going to be my starters. That's really all I need. I don't need 14 total receivers that are on this roster. There's a lot of guys that are really long odds to ever do anything in the NFL, let alone just hit your lineup, right? So it's way too many for me when you have these six guys. Even if you're like, hey, I'm starting these six every week and I want to have a couple more and I want to, continue keeping that as the strength, that's always fine. Like draft for value, trade for need, right? So if a receiver falls to you, you don't take him just because you have 6 good ones, right? You still take him. But I'm going to probably start working off of some of those receivers. Maybe you keep 1 or 2 that maybe one you really feel good about, maybe another one you got at such a great value. You just want to see what it turns into. Totally fine. But there's like 4 to 6 roster spots there that I think you can turn into other positions that might, behoove you on the line. High end quarterbacks, any RB on a 53, there's a small premium at tight end. So even putting in some assets in there, not a bad way to do it. Okay. So as far as the roster, if Caleb Williams and Dalton Kincaid hit their ceilings this year or are closer to their ceilings than their floor, then you can definitely make a run. But I don't see that. I don't bet on outliers, right? I want to go with the odds. I want to go with what's most likely to happen, even if they both have a good year, a solid year. I don't think it's enough necessarily to win. Once you get in the playoffs, we know anything can happen. I just wouldn't bet on it. I don't think it's the most likely outcome.
Yeah.
So build from strength, try to find value. And one of the things I thought about going a little bit crazy, trading away Caleb Williams. I had kind of tinkered with kind of a really ballsy trade there, but that's probably not what you want to do. So I didn't go that direction, but kind of the theme of the show, I think, is trading Bryce Young. So I went ahead here and created a trade of Bryce Young and a second. I know you've got a couple seconds to work with. You can pick which one you want, to Merck 1404 for JJ and a first. And I mean, obviously JJ's out for the season, so you're trading away a guy who's scoring points for a guy who's not scoring points. But I just think his upside and his value, maybe it's preference. Maybe that's not a fair thing for me to say that it's more likely to happen. But I would much prefer JJ. And if I can move up from a second to a first to even just the aesthetics of it, I think help. So that's, I don't know, a trade along that line just to go for that ceiling. You put something next to Caleb Williams that can really make a difference in your lineup. Whereas, Bryce Young, even if he turns out to be good, I don't know that he's ever going to be in that position to be elite. He's just, he's not running. He's not going to be using his legs to score a ton of points. So I want to find that next guy that maybe can blow up or can get me to an elite quarterback, and a potential opportunity to not only do that and improve your pick. That doesn't happen often, but it could when you're talking about injured players. So just something I thought I'd throw out there. Might be kind of interesting, a little bit different look at it. Who knows?
I really like this one because in my mind, I was just thinking like JJ McCarthy probably shouldn't hit your lineup but once or twice, even if he was healthy his rookie year. I know the weapons are good and like I believe in the Vikings system. However, we need to give these quarterbacks, these rookie quarterbacks, a lot more grace than maybe we do. It was just evidenced by Bryce Young. The infrastructure was much worse around Bryce Young, but like he did not perform well. He could have performed much better than he did. And that's partially on him. And so I really like the idea of essentially just banking 2 firsts for Bryce Young in a second. That to me feels good. And I don't even have to have the temptation to start McCarthy. I really think that has some value as well because I can build my position in ways that makes more sense to me. I just have a quarterback on IR who I know is going to go up in value and who may be a worthwhile piece in year 2. He just gets a little bit more runway to do so. So I thought that was really compelling to me. All right. Should we go on to the last Find Me a Trade team?
Yeah, let's do it.
Cool. This one was submitted by Corey Deaton. The league is the Joe's Joe, and Corey's team, named Dynasty Eeyore, is in a 12-team Superflex league with half-point PPRs for running backs and wide receivers, and a juiced-up 1.5 PPR for tight ends. This is a start 10 league with 1 quarterback, 1 running back, 1 wide receiver, and yes, 1 tight end with 5 flexes in a Superflex beyond. So just a ton of flexibility in this format, right, Scott?
Absolutely. Yep. You can go a lot of different directions.
Yeah. And so this manager, again, comments from July, they said that they're rebuilding and they made like 15 draft picks last year, but they still need help. They have 2 elite quarterbacks, 2 elite tight ends, but the rest of the team is rookies or young players. Why don't you break down this roster? Because I've got some thoughts.
Yep. Okay. So he has Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, and then Trey Lance and Spencer Rattler. Running back, Ray Davis, Marshawn Lloyd, Bucky Irving, Kamani Vidal, all the rookies basically from this year, besides Jonathan Brooks. Wide receiver, Tillman, Corley, Franklin, Roman Wilson, Jamari Thrash, Ricky Pearsall, Javon Baker, Luke McCaffrey, again, all the rookies, Jalen Tolbert, Jalen Hyatt, and Jordan Addison. So if it begins with a J or is a rookie, he's got him. And then tight end, we have Trey McBride, Brock Bowers, Tucker Kraft, Tyler Conklin, Colby Parkinson, JT Sanders, Theo Johnson, like a really robust and strong tight end room there from just about every angle.
Yeah, this is an interesting team because it's certainly not how I would have built it.
Sure.
A lot of really low odds bets at the wide receiver room, right? But
Yes.
one of them is probably going to hit. We just don't know which one. And when I say hit, I mean they're going to be relevant to a top 24 to 36 status somewhere in their career. These are all like 5% bets, but you have enough of them where I feel pretty good about one of them hitting. We're just not sure which one it is, right?
Exactly.
So I want to play this out a little bit. Dynasty Onion on Twitter has had
Yes.
this concept. I think he made it up, that he brought up the other day, called the dumbbell, the roster dumbbell. So sort of having your power, your leverage, your point scoring, maybe your value as well at the ends of your roster, having quarterback and tight end matter, and then lengthening the middle with essentially zero value assets. And so like I kind of like that with this team. And I think this team
Yes.
should be a dumbbell team. I think that we should be a little patient. We should see which wide receiver is hitting, and we should trade all of the other ones away for like 4th-round picks, backup running backs, whatever. But we should compress the wide receivers and dramatically lengthen the running backs and say, like, we're not going to put any sort of investment at wide receiver for the next year or so. We're going to put a lot of really low odds bets at running back. And that's really going to be the point of our roster that is going to be churned, that is going to be sort of absurdly long. Because when you have this type of flexibility, when you only have to start one quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end, the temptation for a lot of managers is to ignore running back, in my opinion. And so it creates even better values than a typical league. Is that something that you've experienced as well?
Yeah. Yep. Definitely.
So let's do that. Let's just say, like, I only want to roster 3, maybe 4 wide receivers at most. Even if I had the 4 best receivers, like, I'm going to cap my wide receiver rostership so I can lengthen everything else. And I'm going to try to beat the hell out of people at tight end. So if I get any
Yes.
sort of value gains this point scoring season, this lineup season, I'm going to feed them directly into tight end. That is going to be one end of my dumbbell. I don't have a specific trade though, because I don't know which of your wide receivers are going to do well and which ones are going to do poorly. I think we have to wait 4 weeks.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I agree. I agree with that. And I continue to talk about the success I've had at tight end and using the bully tight end or whatever you want to call that strategy. And, I think that you can really be successful with it because I know I have been, so I've seen it work. And especially with going back to, talking about the 5 flexes and the flexibility and building rosters in different ways, like that's what makes it so interesting. And that's what makes this a great, case study in how do we do it without an elite receiver? Because there isn't maybe a top 20 receiver on this roster.
Totally.
So it's definitely an interesting approach. And I totally agree with what you said. I think that's awesome. The dumbbell thing. I forgot what he had called it, but yeah, I love that. That's awesome. Build the onion dumbbell. I love it.
Yeah, shout out to Dynasty Onion. He's a really smart dude. Puts out all sorts
Yes.
of interesting theories and concepts,
Yes.
and I agree with about 30% of them, which makes
Yeah.
it great,
But it's a great read.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's good to get exposed to people you don't always agree with. Did you have a trade though, for
definitely.
this league?
Yeah. So, I kind of, my trades maybe a little less important than kind of what I want to say, but kind of reiterating essentially what we just talked about. But because of the flexes, because of the premium, you can win with the bully tight end builds. I don't know that there's enough here to compete this year like 100%, but you could, because if everything works out, you definitely could. I mean, I had a roster very similar to this last year, and I ended up going all the way to the championship. I don't think I won, but I didn't have like any running backs. I think I was starting like Samaje Perine like the last, December through the championship. It was not pretty, but my tight ends and quarterbacks carried me. I've seen teams win that championship, not often, but I've definitely seen it happen. It's not the most common build to win, but it's definitely one that works. So what I would kind of do is throughout the season, focus on selling any of the player. You don't have many players over 26, but anybody that at this point you have a real chance here to build something really special that you can, this could be a true dynasty, right? This could be a 3, 4, 5 year run here if you can play things right, because your roster is young, talented, there's upside, there's floor. I mean, you have pretty much everything that you're looking for. Churning your bench spots, continue building up your pick cash or upgrading your picks, as I much prefer, moving thirds to seconds, fourth to thirds, things like that. And then maybe turn that into a wide receiver or upgrade those wide receivers. I think all the receivers that you have being kind of the wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 3 on their own teams, not that we haven't seen those guys be really strong fantasy assets, but it just generally doesn't happen. So a couple of moves that I came up with was to kind of maybe move off of those guys. We talked about stacking earlier in the show, and that's some people are really into that. So when you can find those opportunities, you could go that direction. So I came up with a few different trades, but ultimately what I'll give you is more of the idea of what I might want to do in season, if you think you have a shot and you're not as much worried about, the value coming back, moving a guy like Addison, he's playing behind Jefferson for the next 3-4 years at minimum. That's virtually a guarantee for those two players. We know that scenario, right? One's on a rookie contract, one's locked in with a long contract. There's not a lot that's going to change that. Not that he can't be good. And again, if we like JJ McCarthy, we probably think he's pretty good too, but you still got Hawkinson coming back. It's just, is he ever going to be he can't ever be better than the second option on his team. So what if we move Addison in a third there's a team that has JJ McCarthy and Sam Darnold. So he's locked into that Minnesota passing game. And so depending on the time of year, maybe if you could get to a Brian Thomas or a Jalen Polk, just to find those guys could become the number ones on their teams. So could I move an Addison in a third and pick up a Polk or a Thomas? Or maybe you can get the pick on top of those guys if that manager prefers the stack, or even prefers the fact that he's seen Addison do it. If you wanted to get points in your lineup, I wouldn't do this today, but down the line, same team, Addison, and go for Kupp and try to get, a second or a first on top of that. Add in picks, whatever you need to do, because then Kupp could be your guy. And again, we're 6 weeks, 8 weeks into the season. We know Kupp's healthy. He's rolling. He's scoring like Cooper Kupp. Then that's when I would go for that if I want to try to make a run. But I think you could take that concept and apply it different ways. So it doesn't have to be Addison. Maybe that manager doesn't care about, stacking. Okay, well, let's try moving, Franklin to the Bo Nix manager, or Roman Wilson or Ricky Pearsall to the Purdy manager, right? Like you can apply the concept to any one of those guys. But my point is, either you can go for an older veteran to score the points. That's a number one receiver, or you can try to kind of re-roll that in a way that you can find the next guy, like a Jalen Polk, like a Brian Thomas. They could become the number ones on their teams. And then let's see how it shakes out. And I also have a couple notes for you. There's a team, Will Master K. I would try to get those picks on that team. That might be the oldest roster I have ever seen in my life. Now, he might win this year, but I would try to get his 26 first, like at all costs, and any of his actual picks, even seconds and thirds, because those will be high. And then also shout out to Roto Librarian, who's in the league. And you can, if you acquire Bears players, you can always sell them to Roto Librarian. So keep that in your back pocket too.
Can we get theoretical for a second?
Yeah, of course.
Here's something I've been thinking about, and it came up in my brain again when you mentioned Cup. If you are playing somebody who rosters Cup in week 1 or week 2, you have a real opportunity in a 12-team league to make a difference on your team, not just once, but twice, because you're going to face that manager again, very likely, if you play in a 14 week regular season before the playoffs kick off. And so what you can do is you can calculate the points per game difference of taking that player off of your opponent's roster, not once, but twice. And you can do this in reverse as well. So there are bye weeks. We mentioned that we're in bye week hell in week 12, right? That kind of lines right up when you're revisiting these opponents again, right? And so if you're facing off with somebody, and let's say they get into quarterback trouble, you're playing them this week, they get into quarterback trouble, trade away a quarterback who has a week 12 bye week because they've been hit twice, they got injured, and now they're going to suffer the consequences, and you're not going to have to feel that pain in week 12. I think there are ways to manipulate your first couple matchups by buying veterans off of those teams and then selling to the bye weeks that people aren't paying attention to right now.
The game within the game, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I love that. Yeah, that's interesting. I actually, yeah, it's a great point about Cooper Kupp. The only thing is, if I trade for him after he crushes me week 2, he's gonna get hurt. So I mean,
Always a risk.
Right. No, but yeah, no, I like that. It's funny because my brother-in-law, this poor kid, I've been in fantasy leagues with him for, I don't know, 8 years now, however long I've known him, and he's literally always the top 1 or 2 team in the regular season and always crashes and burns in the playoffs. And I got him into Dynasty for that exact reason. I was like, you know how to build a roster, you know how to draft, you know how to do these things, right? So why don't you do this? And then if things aren't going your way, you can sell off, but you reload for next year because you already have those good players, right? So let's try it out. And so he's in Dynasty, and he's got a good team, and the same thing keeps happening to him. So this year he's like, I don't know, I got all these injuries and I just don't know what to do. So he sells Tyreek Hill to the team that it's won 2 of the last 3 championships and is the clear favorite again. And we're just like, well, okay, I guess we know who's winning again, right? Well, and what happened at the end of last year? Tyreek Hill got hurt. So now he matched up with that team in the playoffs. And not only did he didn't have to play Tyreek because he got hurt, he also got the pick then that he wouldn't have had, and was able to trade that pick for another player, fill in his lineups, and he went on to win the championship. And nice. It's just like, you never know how it's going to go, but you trade away Tyreek Hill and you win because he got hurt, right? And then you didn't have to face him. But like, it's crazy because if he would have kept him and then he got hurt, he definitely would have lost. And so it's crazy to think about, how the scenarios would work out, and you can't ever look back on it because it's not going to help you. But it just goes to show, like, sometimes if you just make the right process moves, it should work out more often than it doesn't. And people hate when I say, if you win 55% of the time, you're winning. Like, people are like, that's terrible. I don't want to win 55. That's terrible. I want to win 80, 90% of the time. And I'm like, the best gamblers in the world, if they're winning 55% of the time, that is absolute smashing. Okay. Yep. They're millionaires if they're winning 55% of the time. Right. And so I think it's about having that process, making those moves, and winning 55% of the time, because over the long haul, over your leagues, over your weeks, over your years, you're going to win more than you lose.
That's a great place to end the episode. It was fun catching up with you, Scott. It's been a minute. It was great talking through our team selfishly. I appreciated that opportunity.
Finally.
Typically we do this like 6 months earlier.
Yeah, that's all right.
But thank you so much to the listeners for submitting your teams. We're going to have probably another 1 or 2 of these in season, to where we knock out a bunch, because honestly, that's our favorite part. It brings up all sorts of different theory and actionability and conversations that we wouldn't have otherwise. So keep those team submissions coming. I think we've got it pinned on the Junkies Twitter page, the submission form. Scott, do you want to throw out the handles for everyone? I'm distracted by football right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. So of course you can follow me at Scott_Sidlow. Tommy's at FF Tommy B. You can follow Rocky at Dynasty FF Addict. Andrew Hall is at Andrew Hall FF. Follow the podcast at Dynasty Junkies. Of course, subscribe and follow DAP Network at DAP Network on Twitter, on YouTube, everywhere else. If you can throw us a rate and review, it would really help out. It would be super awesome, super helpful. Appreciate all the FMATs. Keep those submissions coming. If you go to the at Dynasty Junkies profile, you'll find the link on where you can submit those. It's a real simple form. You just fill it out. We get them. And then we get you on the show and we have some fun with it. And, on to football. Here we go. Week 1, we're off and running. And, let's have a good season. Let's help each other out and let's go win some championships.
55% of the time at the time, right?
Exactly. And with that, let's watch the end of this game. And for Tommy B, I'm Scott Sidlow. Junkies out.